How's it going, everyone? Elvira Gonzalez here. Finally, we're going to explore what is integration testing, at least from Steve Keeney, which is the head fronting engineer at Temporal. And now he is currently the fronting architect at Temporal. Where now here we explore is how we can make sure that large code bases we can maintain that over a long period of time with a wide range of contributors. So in other words, is that we can easily now is change or update or add or extend the functionality of our apps and do a refactors or a migration without the fear of breaking something. So we went through describing all of this from the philosophical aspect of what is now the maintenance, similar for the stuff that you need to do to keep up your pace, for example, to keep up your body in check, or your motorcycle, or your oral health and all that kind of stuff, right? So similar to that, we need to do that in software. And now here there are several stuff that we looked over the couple videos about how we're gonna set all of this infrastructure needed to make this code bases maintainable over a long period of time. Now, this is for UI development, so enterprise UI development. So we went through look first is at the different the infrastructure needed to lay out the foundations of your maintainability in your code, which is the unit testing, the unit testing, something that we're gonna explore that later. The unit that, especially integration testing, that you need integration testing, you need a testing system, a build system, and a static analysis, at least right now in the current state of the application, right? And then on top of that, you're gonna define some sort of processes that you would like to go with. Let me take a quick break here because it's getting warm. All right, and we're back. I just put a fan close to me. So in any case, but this is the fundamentals that we need to put in place, similar to the Maslow pyramid of needs, about the system that we need to put in place. And then on top of that is the processes, such as the code review, document design, and how we're going to integrate our code. So then you have now on top of that some sort of patterns that happens as you do in this kind of process, some patterns that are recurring. So in other words, some recurring stuff that happens over and over and over, and then you want to come up with some sort of solution, a design pattern. So you have, for example, the infrastructure or the architecture, how you're going to organize your files, which is the file structure that we're going to follow here. Also is what is the common abstractions or tool that we need to learn or know and apply in certain scenarios. All right. So whether it's a promise or observables, and also is the component testing. Again, something that we go explore that. But this is now the Maslow's pyramid that, actually, in this course, we actually explore a little bit from that. So on that, and the idea of making your application maintainable is because you want to start from scratch, you want to make a new, fresh side project, or perhaps you inherit this old code bases and you want to make your life much more easy to maintain, which is something that you're going to see a lot, especially in legacy applications or in a particular industry such as health or finance, right? and you need to update all of these different processes to go with new technologies. Now, so we went through this to now look at the basic of the unit testing, or particularly the tests, and how now this is in the spectrum. You have now unit testing, so component or integration tests, and then you have the E2E tests. So the unit testing is something that we dive deep into this. Again, we're not going to we just go over to this unit testing. So what are the tools that we need to use in order to make our code maintainable? So you have now Jest, and currently we're using is VTest for that. Playwright, something that we're going to talk about in today's video, and React and TypeScript, right? So we look at what are the most common or the greatest hits of using unit tests. So for example, like to contain, we check if these elements now are in a collection of values. To contain, to match objects, to expect any, to be to equal, and to be is to check if the value equality, to check to see the referential equality, whereas to equal is to verify is the value equality. Again, something that we describe here as we run our particular tests. And it's important to understand that subtle stuff here, referential equality and shallow equality, as well as deep equality. So to be, what it does is that objects should not be strictly equal, and to equal is similar to objects should pass to the to equal, which is verify is both now to equal compares is deep equality. Okay. Okay. So to be, it compare using object.is, which is for equality reference, right? Equality reference, right? And to equal, it compares deep equality. So in other words, again, there's some caveats to that. So these two fundamentals is part of the foundation of what you're going to do in your test. Hey, do we have the same reference, or do we have the same deep nested object here? So then we look at some of the things that the setup of our unit tests, and that is, well, make all of your tests be reasonable in one single block. So define the setup, the logic, and then you put the assertion. Again, this is some sort of convenient stuff that you can go with and you can do. Some techniques that we can go, especially in a asynchronous test, you might want to go is with expect.resolve or expect.reject, or just using is the async and await for that. So most of the time, one ways of how you can actually make sure that your ticket, for example, if this is a bug, one great way to deal with is that you take the bug report, you take the problematic stuff, and then you write a failing test to make that path, to make it pass. So now, this particular bug report is one of the value proposition of tests that, hey, you can now is make, so you test your stuff constantly or continuously so things won't break behind your back. So if you find a bug ticket for that and you write a particular test to pass that, so now you make sure that actually it won't repeat that again. So Then we look at how we can build the CI/CD process with GitHub Actions. What is GitHub Actions? And now that GitHub Actions allow us is to define this continuous integration, continuous delivery, which is part of this DevOps. In other words, its ability to automate is the co-integration, delivery, and deployment. Something that I am not quite strange. This is not strange to me. I have extensive experience with that. But with this GitHub Actions, is now you have to define all of these different workflows on a file, right? And this particular format is something that we're going to see that in other automations areas. So for example, with Ansible, when you want to automate is the process of how you set up your dev environment, for example, which is something that is very, very, very time consuming. A lot. But in any case, then we look at what is this GitHub Actions, which is a way to define workflows based on GitHub's events or schedule that you define, or webhooks. So you post to and you make an HTTP post to a RESTful API, right, to trigger something, and all of these different jobs that you have along the way that are by default executing in parallel, but you can make that to run sequentially. And all of these jobs, which now runs is actions or bash scripts, which actually is just this recurring, tedious, and complex task to do. So for example, pull the GitHub repo in this runner, which is something that GitHub provide to you. Whether it's a virtual machine, whether it's on Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. And also, so these actions are helpful or are useful, for example, for setting up a tool chain for your dev environments, or defining the authentications for different AWS services or cloud services. Now, we went through that. We look at how can we create our own GitHub Actions, our own automation process, okay, to integrate code, which is something that I really like and I really love about that. I actually make this particularly Venn diagrams to understand a little bit more what is the end goal of all of this, which is automate repeated tasks. That's all. And as we do this, sometimes because this runner is executed from the scratch, we don't want to do that for certain tasks or for certain jobs. So to save us time here, we can catch stuff, whether it's catch dependency, using is the catch itself, or if you go with npm, you can use is the npm action, right? But the idea behind that is now store is a hash. It gives you now a hash of your dependency, and whenever it changes that hash or the package JSONs, then it's going to now regenerate a new node models. So this is something that saves a lot of time. And if you need to generate a new artifact, right? So for example, some build logs or some binary files, you can also use now a workflow to define that and to store these artifacts. So that's great. That's also part of the quick recap how we now set up our build process, and then define some sort of policies needed for make the code follow certain guidelines and some standards for code quality. Not only doing the code review, and also putting some sort of flags or checkbox to tell this checkbox whether it's, for example, when a PR is submitted, I want to create now a PR with this particular format, which is a GitHub action that you can define. So, for example, and so on and so forth. Now, the idea of this GitHub actions and looking at how you can define all of these different checks and automation process, it also now enters here in the realm of security and compliance, because this is not part of this course. This is something that it go beyond that, but it's important to describe that in terms of that anytime you want to integrate code, there's some several rules that you must or some compliance that you must follow, as well as some IT security metrics. So right now, in the security sphere, we have is the castle and moat, which is the way of how now is a philosophy around that all of the that threats can happen outside of the castle. However, when someone getting here is catastrophic, because they can now exploit system vulnerabilities, version system vulnerabilities, or inject malware, perform social engineering attacks, or steal credential is another one. Now, because of that, and Gartner, this multinational IT consulting firm, so Gartner, right? So their clients now demand to have is security built in, not as a set of layers around that. So this is something that some of the analysts come up here and they made up this zero trust policy, which is something that now security companies like Google actually are using behind the scenes, right? So the idea of this zero trust policy is to it's a philosophy where now assume that risk not only can happen outside but inside, and there's some several principles to go with, such as device monitoring and verification, as well as device monitoring and and verification, device access as well, and let's make device security, because I already made this in IT security compliance, but I don't want to memorize this, because the principle of this is it's continuous monitoring and validation. So continuous monitoring and validation by giving the least principle of by following is the least privilege principle. It's like you're gonna provide the minimal amount of rights to those roles, right? So continuous monitoring and validation by providing and following the principle of least privilege, and constantly and have device access control. So even attackers get in, you want to microsegmentate the network, so prevent this lateral movement. So to do that, you implement now multi-factor authentication, so now the users can jump into one segment of the network or some business area so easily. Now, on that, right? This is just to describe this component or technique that is part of a bigger security model, which is the SASE, right? Service edge, service access, security access service edge. That's what now this particularly model that includes several of these techniques: zero policy, zero trust policy, the secure gateway, so to unpack, inspect, and then repack that package. Also URL filtering. It's like, hey, these users can have access to this particular resource. And the CASB, which is the Security Access Broker Service, and a cloud access security broker, where it's give you, so it follows certain principles, like similar like physical security firms, where they provide you stuff like foot patrol or surveillance. Now here they provide you is threats security or threat verifications, data validations, visibility, and compliance. And talk about now compliance here is part of the area in which you, as a senior developers, you need to take care of that, because most of the time when we are building software is in this free land of JavaScript. But we must follow certain compliance depending on the type of product that we're building it. So set of compliance like the ISO 9001 for quality management service, for quality management service, the ISO ISC 2071, which is for information security management systems. It's a set of requirements that your application should have. So for example, must be so your application must be so your application, okay, so your application must be is confidential. Exactly. So your application must provide confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. I think it is. ISO, NISA, this one. Information Security Management System. Again, this is part of the role of the software engineer, that it needs to be very clear. You know, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Right? So again, this is some sort of, this is not a framework, this is some requirements that your system must have. So in any case, after we explored a little bit of the compliance, at least the most common compliance, and also the SOC, which is System Organization Control, made by or conducted by the the American Institute of Certified Public Accountant, so IACPA, right? SOC 1 and SOC 2, which is the update. You also have is the Cloud Service Alliance, the FedRAMP. Again, this is something that is you barely hear about this. The FedRAMP, the U.S. federal government established the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. The PCI and DSS. If you work for any of this fintech, you are quite familiar to this. The PCI DSS, Jesus. Okay. And we're back. The PCI DDS. Oh, let me pause this. And we're back. Yeah, the FedRAM, the PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry data security standards, and then some others industry specific, similar to the PCI, for example, like HIPAA, EBAN or band, and all that kind of stuff. But the point of this is to recap about the IT security and the compliance, and how in the IT we have now these two different security models, castle mode and now the zero trust policy, which is part of this technique of the SASE architecture. A way to combine is network connectivity and network security, because now, well, the cost of software has been, or the cost of letting some vendors host your business assets is quite compelling. And also we have become much more effective and efficient at a distance as we work in this digital landscape as remote workers, right? We need to find a way to make that happen. So SASE, this architecture, which combine that and stand for secure access. SASE is exactly. So SASE is secure access but let me make this English, bro. Yeah, please. So yeah, SASE, which is secure. Okay, is secure access service edge. But the point of this is that it wants to combine the network connectivity and the network security now in this distributed landscape, because these traditional castle modes are not well, or they are not good to deal with these different threats that can happen in this distributed landscape. And because now it's way much more compelling to host all of your to host your data on the cloud, and now we as a developers has become much more effective at a distance. Okay, this way the SASE creates this new unified corporate network based on cloud services that run over the internet. But the name is important here because it's pretty self-descriptive. The secure access service edge, and there are several techniques that they use to enhance that. So for example, zero trust policy, secure web gateway, the security access, the cloud access security broker, and somewhere specific the find one, which is pretty good, pretty cool, by the way. This is quite interesting, and some next generation of firewalls, right? But again, this is now the security models that anytime you're working for a particular company that hosts any of the research on any service provider out there, whether it's AWS, Google, or Microsoft, right? They are now using built-in their services, right? Okay, so if we now go back to what we really care, which is the next phase of the testing, which is looking at the integration testing, specifically the component testing, by working with the testing framework. Yep. By looking at the, how do you put it? By working with, by looking at the component testing, which is part of the spectrum of testing, using VTest, particularly the testing library, which is a wrapper around the different UI frameworks like React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, blah 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 blah. But it will now expose some of the common query method that you can go or that you can use. Yeah, it exposed the most common query methods and the yep, it exposed the most common query methods like that. Yep. So it exposed the most common query methods. Yep. Yep. So it exposed the most common query methods, and the so the most common query and user interaction methods. So for example, with typing or clicking, using now the user events. So we look at how can we now wrap our components with this query, with this query and user specific or user interaction, or common user interactions operations. So that was quite interesting, because as we did that, now we look at if that component has, for some reason, some sort of external dependencies, right? It is for us harder to test those components. So the idea, especially on React component, is to now extract that component into it, or the pattern here is to extract this component into it is or isolate that data. All right, so component isolation here, which is part of the architecture as you might look at this, right? So component isolation or custom test wrapper. So this custom test wrapper is to say, hey, let's go now is to make this particular component and then provide the necessary context that we need to go with, right? So this is part of the, this is now entering into the realm of integration testing, right? Slowly but progressively, we look at how you can make all of these different components and organize that in a way that is make it much more easy to test them. So there is also an architecture design. So all of this kind of stuff is something that has been made for us. So the idea of this is to understand what is the value proposition and when we can apply this. So for example, with this isolating your components into tests is a way of how you can make run of all of this needed tests. Yep, that's right. How we can make how can we run all of these different tests? Yep. How can we run all of these different? How can we test our components, this huge collection of components, in a way that will give us some confidence about it? So that is, again, that's might go beyond the scope of this. That's what I made this section here of architecture for testability. and there are some very nice, how do you put it? Why not? What, French toast? Really? What? Okay. There you got it. So is this. So now this developer actually invests a lot of time to understand this way much more, right? So this is something that go beyond the scope of this. It is also important to understand at least this kind of architecture, testing architecture, all right? This is now entering into the patterns, right? So then we look at how we can make sure about the accessibility testing and code coverage. Specifically, using is now tools like Vitesse or Istanbul, and what is the value proposition of all of this. So if you really care about accessibility, which is something that you should, especially if you're going to provide now your product to the government, then your product is not usable, then you will have to implement that. Now, there is a library that help you with that. It's not a silver bullet, but it can help. And this is now the Axe Core, which now is providing you a list of known check. So you can now improve the accessibility of your app using that. So that's a good thing. That's a very good stuff. Now, and then we talk about is the code coverage. How can we go with code coverage? What is the value proposition of code coverage? Is to see is that at least the most common, the most critical functionality in your application on the UI must be you must run tests for that. So such as you must run tests for that, such as the Redux, for example, or utils. So most of the time you need to make sure that those functionality work as expected. So this is when the code coverage. However, that doesn't ensure. Okay, so code coverage that doesn't ensure that your app, work as expected, because this only tell you that, hey, this particular function has been covered. It doesn't tell you anything more than that. So this kind of test is not necessarily quite trustworthy. But again, some company actually wants to implement that. They don't know, or they have little guidelines of why they need to go with. Perhaps you want to implement code coverage for 100% code coverage on a library, right? Because you want to make sure that actually works as expected. But for an application, that's actually something that might go off. In any case, so this is the couple of stuff that we can configure that in the VTest code, right? So it's ready enforce code coverage per folder structure or functionality, which is something that you can do that. If all property is false, it will only check by file. This is now to check is part of the configuration using VTest. You can also is generating artifacts with your code coverage, because after all, that's exactly what is generating these build logs. The other is generating code coverage report artifacts. Okay. there are the current company that I'm working. They're using is Jenkins to generate that. Jenkins with, I'm not sure if they're using is. I don't think so. I definitely I don't think so. I would like to, you know, I will definitely like to yep. I will definitely would like to now uh, understand that they can go with that. Alright. So for example, uh, I think it is. Wait, what? And there you got it. Excellent. So, so yeah, they might be using that. Formic, exactly. But in any case, this is all the script that they go using. And the different models that they are going with. I get it. Oh, and they're not using is. Okay. So in any case, well, anyway, yeah. Good. So the point of is that we V-test, it can now allow us to integrate this code coverage into that. So that is something great. There's something powerful. I'm not sure if we can actually integrate that kind of coverage into that, and also if they really need to do that in this kind of stuff, at least working for banks and that kind of stuff. So, because we were now looking at how can we test different components, part of the integration components, and and because the more stuff you need to fake, the less confidence you have in your tests, and the only stuff that you need to fix are code that you don't control, and that is timers, randomness. Let's say so math.random, or sorting in a random way, or API calls, right? Everything else, there must be a test on that, and you shouldn't fake that. You in fact wants to recreate that new scenario. Now, we went through looking at the mocking and the spice to understand the difference between one or the other. So mocking is a way to replace the functionality into it's a way to replace the functionality, to do some introspection about it, right? So yeah, just like code coverage report, you should treat this always with suspicion. your test should only fail on stuff that you control. And sometimes you need to fix stuff you don't control, right? As I mentioned before. But this is useful to check when a function is called, especially mock and spy. So mock is a way to replace the functionality of an object. It's a way to replace the functionality. Okay, and spying is like a mock to replace the functionality, but you can do that for one method in an object, right? So we look at how can we do that. You go with mocking the spy, and also mocking third-party libraries. We're very careful of doing that because the only place, as I mentioned, where you can mock stuff is time, random stuff, so sorting, math, or API calls, and perhaps the third-party libraries. So code that you don't own, this is when you now run your test. You might be you might even feel the temptation to create now a Redux store for that, but as long as you can recreate that, your tests will reflect now the real world scenarios. Now, in terms of mocking API requests, we just briefly describe is this library called SWE, right? Which is this is microservice IO. I think it is. No, what is the name of that? Microservice workers. Oh, okay. MSWGS, right? There you go. So industry standard API mocking for JavaScript. Oh, and I get it, man. And I completely get it. So for example, like this, right? So instead of you having to recreate your own server behind the scenes and instead of you having to recreate your own dev server and define the different routes for that, we have now this particular library called MSWGS, which is now behind the scenes mocking you a dev server, where you can only define is what is the payload that we're going to use here, right? So as we do this, okay. So yeah, this is actually this one, and we need to mock this kind of stuff because now we're building is distributed applications that is not only based on servers, but also it runs on different devices. So for example, like mobile devices. So these devices can run something, or you can build on these devices is progressive web apps with offline mode, and those are powered by service workers. And again, service workers is a type of worker, it's a type of unit of execution, it's a type of threads in JavaScript. So it means that it owns its own global and function execution context, the local variable, the global execution context, the own call stack, and the heap. So you can now defer some of these computations and runs them in the background, so you don't block the main thread. So service worker is just a type of workers that now the intent of this is to provide or is the ability to create effective offline capabilities. So there has been a war to this PWA because again it's going to take some quota market share to a lot of these top tech companies. So they say, hey, this is good, but that's it. Yeah, it's good. Now, all right. So, yeah, this is just to recap about the JavaScript threads, right? So global function execution context, where you have the lexical environment, the variable environment, the binding of this, the memory management, such as the call stack and the heap, and the event handling architecture, which is the callback queue, the micro tasks, the event loops, and web APIs and other APIs. So, all right. Yes, we briefly create that, and then finally, let's go to this stuff.
Very early on, when you are either,
which is now the integration testing with Playwright. So, integration testing with Playwright. So integration testing with Playwright. Right. Okay, let's finally get into this. All right. Oh shit. Okay.
this last leg of this workshop is called Things That Steve is Really Excited About. Mock Service Worker. Let's talk about Playwright. This last leg of this workshop is called Things That Steve is Really Excited About. Mock Service Worker. Let's talk about Playwright. So we talked a little about the unit tests. Great, fast, awesome. Not super great for getting that sanity check.
Wait, what?
So we talked a little about the unit tests. Great, fast, awesome. Mm-hmm. Not super great for getting that sanity check very early on when you are either, maybe it's a bad code base of your own, maybe you're responsible, maybe you inherited it. I'm saying you inherited it just to give everyone a feeling, but some of you are like, no, I did this. And honestly, to be clear, there's a lot of reasons why your test coverage might suck that are your fault. There's a lot of reasons why your test coverage might be bad that's your fault. Let them choose an editing which one they like. I think a lot of coverage might suck that are your fault. One, a feeling, but some of you are like, no, I did this. And honestly, to be clear, there's a lot of reasons why your test coverage might suck that are your fault. There's a lot of reasons why your test coverage might be bad that's your fault. Let them choose an editing which one they like. I think a lot about a year ago we did this rush to build out this admin dashboard for managing a whole bunch of stuff around our SaaS product, right? Because previously, if you wanted to add a user, you filed a Zendesk ticket and someone from engineering did it. There's a cap on how many customers we can onboard when you're doing stuff manually, right? And it was on call for the cloud team was terrible. So we chose to do one of those mad dashes, right, and get some stuff done. And the APIs came late, as I joked about before, but we had stubs, so we were good, but integration was hard. But we were also still figuring it out, and designs were changing. So did we write really great tests? No, because we didn't even know the full shape of the thing yet, right? And we threw it together somewhat quickly, right? And so there have been times, honestly, in the last 9 months, that I have been responsible for code bases that I would be embarrassed about demoing in front of you, right? And for really good reasons that I'm very comfortable with having made. Absolutely. Right, so then the question is, how do you actually know this thing works from the perspective of a customer or user? And then also, the way that I'm mostly going to kind of spin this, because again, we did an entire workshop on Cypress. We should probably do an entire one on Playwright at some point, right? Talk to Mark. But the theme that we're going to kind of focus on here for our purposes is how do we use this tool? To the question someone said before about what 20% and what 80% are you covering, right? How can we use this tool for rapidly getting some sanity around this code base? Mm-hmm. And so we're not going to go all the way into everything Playwright does. We are going to do the high level of like, here is the 20% that you need to know that will make your life a lot easier. And then we can kind of build on it from there. So with that.
Okay. Here we are going to look at the 20% of stuff to get what you need.
No, that will make your life a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. That will make your life much more easier.
And then we can kind of build on it from there.
And then kind of build there from, and then kind of build from there. Okay. The TLDR of that is that.
So with that, let's do a quick, like, just read everyone on what Playwright is. The prior iterations of Playwright have gone by other names. I mean, they've been different technologies. You might have used like WebDriver.io, Selenium, which is the Jenkins of. I'm gonna get so many emails. There's Selenium, there's WebDriver, Cypress. Playwright is the latest hotness, and like, for good merit, right? Not just because it's the newest. There is a protocol for like interacting and driving Chrome. It's either the Chrome developer, it's CDP.
It is a protocol. Okay. Any browser, any platform. Okay. Let's get into this. Playwright enables reliable end-to-end testing for other web apps. Any browser, any platform, one API. Chrome, cross-browsers, platform, cross-browser, cross-platform, cross-language. Use the Playwright API in TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, .NET, and Java. Test mobile web, native mobile emulation of Chrome for Android and mobile Safari. The same rendering engine works on your desktop and in the cloud. But again, this is native mobile emulation of Chrome for Android and mobile Safari. Is to test those browsers. Resilient, no flaggy tests, auto wait, web first assertion, and tracing. No trade-off, no limits. Really? Test frames, pierce, shadow down, trust events, multiple everything. Full isolation, fast execution. Powerful tooling, code gen. Generate tests by recording your actions and save them into any language.
Hey everyone! In the last video, we took a look at how to install Playwright and run your tests using the VS Code extension. We also looked at how to debug your tests. From here, we importing test and expect from Playwright test, generate our test based on our user actions. Code for me, await page.goto, and the URL I pasted in. It's in here, and you can see that they have been created in VS Code for us. So that's pretty good for a test. Let's press the cancel button to. We're not really testing anything. So we've only just recorded our user actions. Now we need to actually write some assertions. So await. I'm actually not sure. Is allow me to pick the right locator. So I want to make sure that there's only, look, it's highlighting the test ID to do title. I'll hover. You can accept to copy the locator in press paste count. We can actually, let's put, there's a problem here. I expected 2, I expected 1 and I received 2. So that's good, our test is working. So you can come along here and bring that back to 2. Now, this is great, this is a better test, but what if we wanted to have some more down here? What if we wanted to have, let's put, for example, here, we've got an account of 1 as well, and we wanted to make sure, say there was 3 of these and 2 for being active. We want to actually add another to-do. We can do that. What it does is it allows us to record in a specific place in our test, and we want to actually,
it's recording test. Okay,
So,
okay.
again, I'm gonna cancel that.
Chill. Powerful tooling. CodeGen generate tests by recording your actions, save them into any language. Playwright Inspector inspect page, generate selector, step through the test execution, see click points, and explore execution logs, and trace viewer. Capture all of the information to investigate a test failure. Playwright trace contains text execution screencast, live down snapshot, and action explorer, test source, and many more. How to record a trace, how to open the HTML report, how to open and view the trace. Okay. But chosen by companies and open source projects. Visual Studio Code, Bean, Disney, Material UI, Bank. I think this is the Bank of England. Fundamental white label web components features for your design system. Okay, for the design system. Adobe, React Navigation, and this one, Insights. So, enables reliable end-to-end testing for mobile web apps. Okay, let's keep going here.
For like kind of basically driving, operating Chrome, it's like if you use like Puppeteer, the same basic kind of concept. That team, I believe, is like at least somewhat owned is a strong word, maintained by Microsoft at this point. But the team did work to kind of build the same bindings for Firefox and even WebKit/Safari, so you can drive all these things based on like the modern, latest, and greatest JavaScript tooling. Because as like I've joked and alluded to, between like ES modules and like TypeScripty stuff, right? Like the ecosystem has like done one of those like giant quantum leaps in the last few years, where like even just in Cypress, and to be clear, I still have a slightly older version of Cypress. Like things that don't support ES modules, like Storybook was guilty of this. There's a lot of things that basically became untenable in modern apps because they were built on common JS because that's what existed at the time. So in a new app, I would definitely say stuff that, you know, a modern app, cool. You might still choose to use, like all this stuff will work too with the older stuff as well. But so it does bring a lot of that modern module system build processes to the table. It also does drive Firefox and even Safari, because Safari's a weird one these days. And allows you to do a bunch of really good table.
Really?
Cool. You might still choose to use, like all this stuff will work too with the older stuff as well. But so it does bring a lot of that modern module system build processes to the table. It also does drive Firefox and even Safari, because Safari's a weird one these days. And allows you to do a bunch of really great stuff for basically spinning up a bunch of browsers, navigating through them, and kind of kicking the tires on it. And like I said, like honestly, a few really good integration tests, one of the questions from the chat before, will probably, if they break, won't give you a lot of insight into why they broke because they're far from the implementation, but a few really good browser-based integration tests will at least give you the confidence that everything works, right? Not a lot of insight when it doesn't, but like giving you a lot of confidence that things actually work the way that you want and getting you to the point where you can start on that, like, honestly, a few really good integration tests, one of the questions from the chat before, will probably, if they break, won't give you a lot of insight into why they broke because they're
a really good integration test.
Like honestly, a few really good integration tests, one of the questions from the chat before, will probably, if they break, won't give you a lot of insight into why.
So a few really good integration tests, if they fail, they won't give you too much of the context.
Why they broke because they're far from the implementation.
So if they fail, they won't give you too much detail about why they fail, because they are far from the they fail because they are far from a few really good integration tests. If they fail, they won't give you too much detail about why they fail because they're far from the implementation. Because they are far from the real life
But a
implementation.
few really good browser-based integration tests.
But a really few browser-based integrations
Tests will at least give you the confidence that everything works.
will give you at least the confidence that everything works.
Right? Not a lot of insight when it doesn't, but
Not a lot, exactly. Not a lot of insight when it doesn't.
like giving you a lot of confidence that things actually work the way that you want.
But it gives you a lot of confidence that your app works the way you want. Okay. So you can implement that, but they are not that good to provide you insights. Not a lot of insight.
And getting you to the point where you can start on that like large scale like refactor and trying to like pay down that tech debt without losing your mind in the process. You want this will at least give you the confidence that everything works, right? Not a lot of insight when it doesn't, but like giving you a lot of confidence that things actually work the way that you want and getting you to the point where you can start on that like large scale like refactor and trying to like pay down that tech debt without losing your mind in the process. We have a second repo for this. Purposely, these are not built in React. These are built in Svelte, mostly to point to, like, this should not be a framework-specific course, despite my case study on my own Redux issue earlier. But like, there's a bunch of just apps where we can drive around. Because like, theoretically, this is like, your user does not care whether or not using Svelte or Vue or Angular or Backbone or jQuery or React or what have you. They're going to a website. Like, half the internet is probably still WordPress and jQuery, to be honest, despite what you read on Hacker News. And so you can go. And so one of the ways unique to our interest in this workshop, where I would say that this is a really great option, is if you're doing the, every few year framework switch, right? That never actually happens. You're always about to do it, and then you end up like 3 React pages in a Backbone app. And so this is a great way to kind of build yourself the infrastructure to begin figuring that out and moving stuff and doing a large refactor and stuff along those lines. Ideally, unless I have made some terrible mistakes, which I might have, we can set up Playwright using npx. Let's check it out real quick. So you got this. Basically, what it will do is it will pull down all the browsers. So we will go ahead and we will get started here. How to install npx. Let's check it out real quick. So you got this. Basically, what it will do is it will pull down all the browsers. So we will go ahead and we will get started here. How to install Playwright, npm init Playwright latest. Again, I use pnpm normally, so that'll do it as well. But here we've got it where we can do npm init. That's one of those commands which you run once in a repo, and then good luck trying to remember. For a lot of you,
you wrote once and good luck trying to remember.
Questions.
You don't need to remember that. You need to understand
that. I don't like E2E. I like this question. Add a GitHub Actions workflow? Don't mind if I do, right? Like, absolutely. Install the Playwright browsers. That seems like I need it. Now I probably have it in my cache, so that probably went way faster for me, but that's okay. One thing you notice, and I just say this in case you have a need for it, it can go on, like, you can go on the internet and do things too, right? It can go to any URL you give it. So if you wanted, automate a browser to do things, and when we see some of the other tooling, you'll see why that could be useful for all sorts of terrible reasons. So some things that I would like to call out that I think are super interesting for our purposes and like maybe partially intentional on my part is to look at how a Playwright test is structured. All right, it's got a test. It has a title. They are all async functions because we're controlling a browser. Let's be clear here. You do get this page object passed in, right? And there's some other things in there as well. But it's really interesting, like how you find stuff on the page. It effectively has the same like syntax or API as like the testing library stuff that we did earlier, right? So for instance, like if you're like, hey, it was really great, Steve, that we talked about some of the nuances of component testing and we discovered the laughs that we had along the way. Like I don't have that many component tests, to be totally honest with you. Partially because I didn't like Enzyme as much, right? Like. There's also reasons. I do think that, like, for me, it's unit tests and Playwright tests predominantly, right? And so, like, I think some other people have a lot of component tests. I'm kind of like scooped in the middle, where I've got the unit tests in that like spectrum, and I've got these. But like, that's just my taste, and like, I don't want to like, obviously, I don't want to enforce my taste on you, which I've definitely been doing. But like, it's fine. But generally speaking, I like this as well. But the trade-off is slower, and when it breaks, you don't get a lot of like, you're not going to get anything logged to the console with the diff of the snapshot and why it's broken, right? Like. You can figure it out, but like it's going to be a little bit different. But the important part that I bring up here is it looks, other than some awaits, and the idea that there are methods here instead of having to use like user event or fire event, and you can't actually fire events because this is truly you're driving a browser like a customer would. You have to almost do this stuff like we're building up to something on purpose. And you can click as a method this time. So there's like little nuances here, but generally speaking, super powerful for kind of spinning up. So let's go ahead and let's do npx Playwright test. Let's hope that I picked the right repo and don't embarrass myself once again. It's Chromium, WebKit, and all those things, and then it shows me a report. Right, and the report is an HTML file. Let's go run that as well.
And they show you a report. Okay.
Cool, and you can see all the different tests. It tests like, do you have a title? And I can see everything in here as well. And this is really not all that interesting. It shows you everything, so on and so forth. What I would like to bring your attention to is there are ways you can do everything if you don't have VS Code, but like I haven't walked around the room. Looks like almost. Is anyone not using VS Code? All right, cool. There is a plugin, you don't need it, that does that kind of test filtering that we saw before, where I can run a given test. It also has a hotkey, which is command semicolon and then the letter L will run the last test again, which I believe also works with MyTest. If you've got that plugin as well, so you can do. I have not. I still go and run npm test while later watching because like I'm just muscle memory, but it's super cool. And you can run these tests like this as well, and this one will spin up the browser, and you'll kind of see it do its thing, and it will leave the browser open, and that is somewhat an important point that we're going to deal with. Also, you'll notice that if you have the plugin installed, I mean, you can not leave the browser open as well. That's a thing. But like, I really like these, and this will relate back to even if you're like, no, I like my component tests. There is a reason why you might still do some of your component test developing in Playwright as well. The big question is, with my screen zoomed in, can I show two windows at once? We're going to find out together. Put that one over there. Put that one over there. Yeah, it works. We'll close this sidebar. And one of the things you can, I needed the sidebar. You can do this pick locator. And you can see, look at that. People ask me for like, how did you know that thing had the role? I cheated. I cheated hours ago.
What?
Put that one over there.
Wait a single moment.
We'll close this sidebar. And one of the things you can, I needed the sidebar. You can do this pick locator. And you can see, look at that. People ask me for like, how did you know that thing had the role? I cheated. I cheated hours ago.
Oh my God.
a year ago, to the point where that's how I kind of like have an intuitive sense about these things.
That's from the Playwright extension.
That's from the
Yeah.
Playwright
Like, it's spun up this
extension.
browser, and then it puts it in here,
That's awesome.
and then
That's.
Playwright extension.
yeah,
That's awesome.
and like it spun up this browser,
And it put it here, get by rolling, it's
And
following its
then,
conventions for that.
like it'll paste it in or whatever, right? So that will give me. I'd have to have the page dot like, right? And we know that I picked the same one for funny reasons because there's a button on the page. We know that the simple finding of that, button means that it is on the page. If that button was to not exist, so for instance, this one would definitely not exist, and then we were to run the test, it'll fail. So, right, and right, how embarrassing.
Yeah.
Should it fail like that? Click.
Big question about having used that many frameworks this much in a row is like, am I slightly mistaken? Or did it just not run again? We'll see.
Because the expect would be true no matter what. You've already clicked on the first link.
But like not finding it should fail, but like.
Exactly. Not finding it should fail.
You usually know that you're in bad shape because like the wait for in testing library, like animations happen, network requests take a certain amount of time, especially because we're the real world at this point, right? It is driving this browser. And like things take time. So it will, you can see it's got a test timeout of 30,000 milliseconds. For those keeping track at home, that's 30 seconds. And so like, you can tell by the spinning that things are gonna go poorly. This sidebar plugin is great when it's great. You will end, if you try to like cancel tests midway through, you will end up in a bad state. Like it is great when it works, and if you get it into a weird state, you need to quit VS Code and open it again. That said, what it does well, it does so amazing that we deal with its peculiarities at certain points. This test fails because it tried to click on a thing that didn't exist. Maybe it is, I'm just mixing up, maybe it might be a different selector as well. But yeah, so what's super powerful here is you saw how easy it was to get a selector. Don't worry, this gets better. You saw how easy it was to get a selector. And you know that like if you had like 3, 4, 5, 10, 1 test that went through and like hit all the critical parts of your code base, right? Like, can you be relatively certain that you didn't break anything in a very serious way? Yeah, right? And that's, I think, one of the really kind of powerful parts. I do want to like kind of just do a quick tour of a few things here as well. The one thing that like for one of these example apps there is a database that you need. So
they allow you to get selectors from that to query of that. Perhaps using your component testing behind the scenes to actually do that.
The part that I wanted to go into
most
was
likely
Playwright configuration, where a lot of things are configurable. If you wanted to make an E2E directory, which I don't like acronyms, you'll notice if you read like the copious notes that I wrote, I will spell out Visual Studio Code every time instead of writing VS Code. You can set the timeout for both a test as well as for a given expect. Fully parallel will mean it will spin up, depending on how many cores in your computer, that many threads running in a browser. Most CI/CD processes, I think you're still down to 1. Like it will try twice in
most
CI/CD
process.
Build. 0 if you're developing.
I only have one.
Tighter feedback loop, but hopefully protection against flaky tests. How many workers do you have? The reporter, we started HTML. We'll play around with some stuff in here a little bit. This one is probably the one you will most likely end up using, which is this way you don't have to type in a full URL. If you don't put the protocol,
but use URL in actions like a way to go to.
You can do interesting things with environment variables. So you could do something like, hey, do this unless like we're in like the CI/CD process, or unless like I choose targeting against staging. One of the things that I have done previously is I will have the base URL for my app as an environment variable. So I can point the development server and its APIs at like mocks, or I can point it at production, right? Because every backend team likes to tell you that staging should be a perfect representation of production. That has never been the case ever. And so I can point my front-end app at staging, at production, at development. So you might choose to do something there as well. If you don't want all the browsers, a project can just do --project Chromium. It will run all of them. You can do interesting things here as well, which is like what tests you want to run. Also, like various different.
Just
This
again
way you're
more
not doing the thing.
just
I
again
understand that the browser has
branded
like,
browser.
simulators. We all do the same thing, which is we make our window real skinny, right? And then we make it wide again, and then we make it skinny, and then we make it wide, right? This will like run your tests, saving you for that. This one will also be somewhat useful to us, which is folder for test artifacts.
Folder for
Right. If only I had a
test
way.
artifact.
Store my artifacts from my build process. Look at them later. And this one I also deeply love and will probably just comment out. It does not work with the VS Code plugin. But this one, when you run the test, will also spin up your server too. Because nobody likes the thing where they go run the test and realize that they killed off the server. And then your tests all fail. And then you realize that your test didn't fail, your server just wasn't running. So you can have it like whatever port you choose to run on, whatever command it takes to spin up your app, you can have it so that when you do npx playwright test, it will also spin up your web server and life will be amazing. We will make a new test file. I mean, I could write in this one too, but like, what do I do? Pokemon spec.ts. Out of the box, it
During
uses
example,
spec. Could you change
during
that?
local.
You could. Why am I using spec? Because Vitest was looking for test. Right? And so by the file name, Playwright will run the spec files, Vitest will run the test files, and never the twain shall meet.
In the using Cypress.
If you don't like spec and you don't have Vitest, do whatever you want, right? Like, change it to whatever makes you happy. That right now makes me fairly
it's for
happy
one
as we kind
specific
of
stuff.
go through and we do our thing. Cool, it's got that base one in there. So let's, I'm gonna spin up my app real quick so we can take a look at it. Make sure it works before I start testing the app and I pulled the wrong repo. So there are a bunch of different apps that you can choose to test. I basically, it's got just dumb stuff to play around in, right? This is basically my like sample playground. Like we're not gonna do everything in here, but if you want to like try different things, that's why it puts a stupid toast notification that vanishes, all sorts of stuff like that. You can like as a fun playground. This is my perverse idea. You've got things. It's got file downloads. It's got everything you could probably want. It says input obstacles from before that you can drive, do things with. This is actually the one that has a database and has auth, so you can log in and sign up and like analyze the cookie. So if you want to try out stuff, like again, like if we do a full version of this, like we can go all the way in. This is a Pokemon search, which is one I'm gonna try out. And you will also notice that the query param automatically updates, so I could test stuff like that as well. I have full control over the browser. I don't have to use JSDOM or anything along those lines. I can see stuff. It's like a full-on like spa. I think some of them serve that. Where I can like see views within views. You can get facts about dogs, right? So if you want to step out different network requests, you can put these on thing. You can write to the clipboard. All the things are things you can test in Playwright. We're obviously not going to do all those. My goal today is to show you how you might weaponize this tool to get as much sanity around your gnarly code base as you possibly can as quickly as possible. With that, we'll go through like writing a test real quick, and then I will show you that for our purposes, when it comes to the theme of our time together, we're not going to write that many tests. And I will show you why I think that for getting sanity around your code base, I am now thinking that maybe I should just open the workshop with this. But then it would have made everything else less fun, so this feels like a crescendo at the end. Cool. So let's go ahead and like kind of look at some of the differences here. Your test and expect, this one come from Playwright test instead of Vitest. You don't have a describe because it's test.describe, does the same thing. We'll grab those and we will do test. It has an input field.
Do you use it instead of test here?
I don't think so. Yeah, now I know that because I tried that earlier today because I expected someone would ask me that question. There's like the things that you just do, and then when you're like preparing for these things, what questions are people going to ask me? Input field for that question. There's like the things that
Instead of test here.
I don't think so. Yeah, now I know that because I tried that earlier today because I expected someone would ask me that question. There's like the things that you just do, and then when you're like preparing for these things, what questions are people going to ask me? Input field for searching for Pokemans. You can steal them. They're there as a hidden treat in the VS Code directory. It has an input for Pokemans. Awesome. I should have actually called it Pokemon so I don't get like a cease and desist letter, but here we are. Awesome. So like, what will we seek to do here? Let's write a simple test. And so first thing we want to do is, did I put the base URL in? Honestly, failing test in there intentionally. That was what was hanging out for those 30 seconds. It's because I literally had that test where I tried to make it fail. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. Let's get rid of that file completely. Cool. I wonder if that's why stuff was breaking here before. Yeah. Okay. Cool. This works better if you have more than one monitor. Let's see, because everything's failing me at this point. But let's take a look. So yeah, you can hover over and get a sense of everything on the page and what the selector is. The other really powerful thing that I absolutely love is, and I wonder, because I got some weird highlighting that won't go away in this case as well.
Pick locator.
Sure. I can do page.get by role, and I can do like input. We can have a button or something like that. One thing, things are being weird for me now was actually as I was typing earlier, it would like highlight like the thing in the browser as I was typing it, so I'd get like the visual feedback as well. Test, oh yeah, you get by test ID search. So let's kind of show what this would look like. Page. Oh yeah, there you can see it, right? I'm just typing, and it knows like it's highlighting that for me based on where my cursor is in VS Code.
Holy moly! It is holy moly!
It shows it for me in Chrome, and that I should not be that amused by something that simple, and here I am, right? And so I've got that, and it will show it to me. Now, what? So the integration is super important. What I am trying to kind of iterate towards is showing how we can use this to get like a lot of like sensibility around stuff. So just to show you real quick, I can also like, if I grab this, you can see like that works. And you can even see like what selector matched it, like a partial match in this case on the placeholder did get it for me. So like little changes shouldn't break your test. Like Playwright, more so than testing library, is built to be somewhat resilient despite the struggle bus that I just wrote on for a little bit with the plugin having an errant port running. But for whatever I'm running, I get that visual feedback as I'm moving through the code, what I have and stuff along those lines. So for instance, like we could do something with whatever one to say I want. I'm gonna just kind of move this a little bit so we can see. So I've got the search input. I can take that and I can then like say like, oh wait, and we should do search input dot type, and we'll do Pika, and we'll do page get by role. We'll look for a link, and look at the background. Look at the background. All, if I'm like, what was it again? Like I get all of the help. Probably moving my cursor like ruins it. You have to trust that like on a bigger monitor or like 2 screens, it's pretty dope. Get role by link. Let's make that happen again. Now it's gonna fail me again. We'll do name Pikachu. Cool. And do I hit that button again and have it fail me? We'll find out. Yeah. Unclear versus a restart. What's gonna happen there? If I have to do that, I will do it quickly so that we can kind of like pull this train to the station. But let's see if I can kind of get to the main point without that. Because like it's like one of those things where 60% of the time it works every time. But I probably have like some other errand process on some process ID that, other than a restart, nobody wants to watch me find at this point. But we can also run that test, and I'm going to turn off with the. I will get an error if I try to run the test, and I want to show you that error. MPX Playwright test. It is going to yell at me that something is running on that port, and it's going to say, hey, if that's cool with you, and you don't want to make sure that we're the only thing on that port, you can have this setting to reuse existing server. It's true. I use this a lot because I'm developing, and I like don't want it, like that's really great for like CI/CD. I spin it up, I want to run it, but like if I have one running, just use that one. And so I will do that. We'll pop that setting in here as well. Cool. And now I should be able to run the thing, and it will run it across all of them. And 3 passed, and everything is good, right?
Okay, so, well, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.